David Bacon, a freelance journalist and writer for Truthout, is a returning guest whose latest piece, published in Truthout, spotlights sexual harassment claims at Mi Pueblo Center in Oakland. Hello, David. Welcome back to Truthout TV.
Hi, Ted.
So before we get into the heart of the story, I wanted to talk a little bit about what constitutes sexual harassment in the workplace.
Okay, well, in this particular case, the kind of sexual harassment involved is one in which a co-worker makes unwanted sexual advances and makes sexual remarks, a man to a woman. So this is really two things. One is the unwanted nature of the advance, and the other one is creating a workplace, or that the employer, the company, is responsible for maintaining a workplace that is free from a hostile atmosphere that is caused by these kind of sexual remarks. And so these are the two kinds of sexual harassment that are involved here.
Okay, so what is the alleged occurrence at Mi Pueblo that happened to this person, Laura Robledo?
Well, Laura Robledo got a job this last summer at Mi Pueblo Supermarket, which is a Latino supermarket serving the Latino community. It's a chain of supermarkets. She got a job in the store in San Jose on McLaughlin Road. She says that last October, a co-worker said things to her of a sexual nature that were so upsetting and so ugly that she didn't even want to tell me what the words were that had been used. But she said also that he went beyond this, that he attempted to embrace her and physically kind of kiss her, tried to kiss her, make these advances to her, which she resisted. She went to the management of the store and made a complaint. The management of the store said they would investigate. A week later, they gave her a letter. The letter said that after the investigation, they didn't find that anything had happened. She said that she couldn't understand how they could send her a letter like this because she had two witnesses to what had gone on. But she said that's what the letter said. She protested about that. She continued to protest about this kind of atmosphere in the workplace there. And she said that 2 weeks later, she was fired. She said that they had accused her of getting into an argument with another worker that she said was not true. She said that she believed that this was a pretext for firing her, essentially for not being quiet, for continuing to complain about the original incident and the atmosphere that was taking place in the store there.
It's curious to see what happened during these interviews. I mean, she's not privy to what the coworkers, meaning the witnesses to the event that happened, the sexual harassment event that happened to her. And most employers have, they have an employee handbook that highlights things like if sexual harassment happens to them, there is a process that and the employee, the people involved go through, and many of the employers, that is, like to say they take this very seriously. So I'm curious, did you find out anything beyond what was in the Truthout article about how that process went forward in terms of did the employer do their due diligence? Did the people that were the witness to the occurrence, did they change their story?
I asked Mi Pueblo Supermarkets for their side of the story. And what I got was an email reply by a representative of the supermarket who said in the reply that she couldn't comment on Laura Robledo's case because it was a legal question. She said that, and then she made a sort of a general statement in which she said that these issues are taken very seriously by the supermarket. She said actually that there is a mandatory sexual harassment training that all Mi Pueblo employees are required to undergo. But that doesn't really answer the question. In fact,
it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
It makes it even more serious. If there is such a a kind of training that goes on, and the harassment took place nevertheless, obviously this is even a more serious question than it would be otherwise.
And then Laura was let go from her job, correct?
That's right, she was. So there's a question of retaliation here as well, too. Clearly.
And there was a protest in front of the Oakland store where she used to work.
Well, the Oakland store is not the one where she used to. She worked in the San Jose store.
Okay.
The protest took place in front of the Oakland store, because her complaint comes after a long history of protests about Mi Pueblo, which started when workers began trying to organize themselves into an association called the Mercado Workers Association that is supported by a union, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, over 3 years ago. When that process began, Mi Pueblo laid off over 300 workers, saying that they didn't have work for them. At the same time, they were opening new stores in other areas. So the union accused Mi Pueblo of actually using the layoffs as a way of frightening people in order to keep them from organizing themselves. Then last summer, in August, Mi Pueblo announced that it was beginning to use the E-Verify immigration database, which is a database that's electronic database maintained by the federal government's immigration authorities, ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that Mi Pueblo was going to screen future hires through that database, in theory, in order to not hire people who didn't have any papers. Everybody that works at Mi Pueblo practically is an immigrant. In fact, the chain is owned by an immigrant, Juvenal Chavez, who himself said that he came to the United States as an undocumented worker a long time ago. The net effect of saying that the company was using the E-Verify database was to, again, frighten people who work in the stores over their possible lack of immigration status. When there was protest about this, which centered at the Oakland store, which is why Laura Robledo's protest took place there, when there was protest over this, then Mi Pueblo management said that actually they were being audited by the federal government, by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which was going into the company records to try to find out who was undocumented, who wasn't, and then force the company to fire the people who were undocumented. Obviously, that was even more terrifying to those workers. Significantly, Laura Robledo tried to give a letter that was directed to Juvenal Chavez at that demonstration. She and her supporters went down to the doors, into the stores, tried to meet with the company manager. Security guards closed the doors to the stores, wouldn't let anybody in or out. The managers refused to come and accept the letter, which she finally left on the sidewalk in front of the doors. She said that she had tried 3 times to give a letter to Juvenal Chavez about her case. But she also, in that letter, sort of joined her issue of sexual harassment with this issue of immigration enforcement, and said that she was also opposed to both what the company was doing, the E-Verify checks, and also to what the federal government was doing in terms of, doing this immigration audit at a time when people were trying to organize a union, something that would clearly frighten people and make them much more reluctant to do anything that might prejudice their job.
Well, certainly the irony is thick with regards to the CEO of Mi Pueblo, Juvenal Chavez. He himself, an undocumented worker who came to the United States in the 80s to work, and then worked his way up to now being the CEO of this very profitable food, well, basically a supermarket. They call it a food center, but it's a supermarket. And then you've got the layers of conflict, What's that? I'm sorry?
There's a chain. It's actually a chain. There's a bunch of these stores now.
Right. And then they bill over, I think, $300 million a year.
Quite a lot of money.
Profits.
That's right.
So they make a pretty healthy profit there. But the other is the web of conflict that is going on. You not only have employee-employer conflict, but you also have government and business conflict. So it's this. It's
well,
not.
I'm not actually sure that there's a conflict between the government and the store.
Oh, is the store just alleging that this is happening?
Well, they're saying, first of all, when the store said that they were using the E-Verify database, this was a voluntary decision on the part of the store. There is no law or government order that says that the company has to use the E-Verify database. So this was a decision taken by the company on its own. Then when they said that they were being audited by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, well, to begin with, there is what's called an operating procedure within this agency of the government that says that they are not supposed to undertake any kind of immigration enforcement action in the middle of a labor dispute for obvious reasons, because these things tend to get used in order to frighten workers to stop them from organizing. When the union went to ICE and made this protest and said that they weren't obeying their own rules, ICE essentially told the union to get lost. So here you have a government agency that is not abiding by its own rules, and their enforcement action is clearly having the net effect of frightening workers in the middle of an organizing effort. You wonder whether whether there's not a conflict, but it's sort of the government is acting, let's put it this way, in what seems to be the interest of the employer, even though the employer is saying that they really have no control over it and it's really nothing to do with them. In fact, Juvenal Chavez made a video in which he said he felt sorry for the people who might lose their jobs as a result of it. But if the other effect of this is to stop workers from organizing, which is obviously something that the company wants, you wonder how sincere that protest is.
You know, I have a couple questions, but I'm going to circle back to the first one, which is something that you highlighted earlier, which was the Mercado Code of Conduct. What is that?
Well, this is a code of conduct that was written by the Mercado Workers Association with the help of the union that attempted to sort of set a set of ground rules for the treatment of workers, in which employers would say that they, for instance, would obey all labor protection standards, things like minimum wage and overtime laws, that they would respect the right of workers to organize and wouldn't try and retaliate against them for doing that. Basically things that are already really part of the law, but in which the employers would specifically commit themselves to obeying the law.
The second question is about Juvenal Chavez. You know, I did talk a little bit about, and you talked about, how he came to this country as an undocumented worker. Do you know, through his moving up the ranks in terms of working on farms, and then he went into meat processing, was he ever part of a union? Do you know anything about his biography to indicate that if he was ever part of a union?
No, actually, I don't know, Ted.
Okay. I was just curious because it seems like there's the kind of anti-union bias that some employers have against any kind of organizing activity or unions in general. Sometimes you may have a person who was maybe involved in a union and through sour grapes or whatever, or decided that this is not the way in which they were going to monetize their business.
It's possible that there's a personal element in here, but I would say that the likely reason is simply economics, is simply money. That
Right.
If workers organize a union in those stores, they're going to ask for higher wages and they're going to ask for more benefits, and that's going to cost money. And you know, he's acting pretty much like any other business owner who says, I don't want to have to pay more if I don't have to. And unfortunately, the culture of the U.S. workplace today is that employers look at any effort by their workers to organize as kind of like a war in which there is no limit to what they are willing to do. And partly it's the weakness of our labor laws that say on the one hand, yes, workers have the right to organize the union, and no, it's not legal to retaliate against workers if they try to do that, but there's no punishment for any employer who does that. And so consequently, we have a huge industry of what are called anti-union consultants, basically, who advise employers on what kinds of tactics they ought to pursue when workers start to organize. So, I think really Juvenal Chavez is pretty much doing what employers in this country do, period. It's kind of a sad commentary on the unwillingness of employers to respect basic labor law and basic labor rights in this country.
Brad, and then you also have the phenomenon of at-will employment. That's
right, and in a way, Laura Robledo's case is kind of like a symptom of this deeper problem. If there were a greater respect for the rights of workers to organize, if workers had unions with more power over the workplace, the frequency of sexual harassment problems for women, for instance, would go down because workers would have some means of stopping them and of holding companies accountable. Here in her case, really pretty much all she could do was to make a complaint to the company. When the company couldn't decided there was no basis for the complaint, that door was essentially closed. There was really no place for her to go there. And even worse, she lost her job not long afterwards. That also is something that a union, in fact, she said it when I interviewed her. I asked her why she was supporting the union here. She said, well, because they would support me. If there were a union here in the store, I would probably still be working there.
Right. So what are the next steps for Laura? What's going to happen at this point?
Well, I think that she's considering filing a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, and then she's also joining forces with workers in the stores who are protesting both over sexual harassment and workplace conditions, immigration violations, and trying to organize.
Okay. David, thank you so much for being on the program.
My pleasure.
David Bacon is a writer and photographer whose new book, in fact, is coming out it's forthcoming, as they say. The Right to Stay Home will be published by Beacon Press, and that's Truthout TV for another week. I'm Ted Asregadoo. Thanks for watching.